the idyllic villages that cling to our coastline.
This is absolutely breathtaking.
Known for their beauty.
To approach under sail like this is just thrilling.
And serenity.
It's a snapshot of a period that we've now lost.
Now destinations for our leisure. But once they played a vital role in the history of our island nation.
I can't believe this is actually happening.
Oh, wow. We've got a lunar landscape there.
It's incredibly important in terms of our heritage, and it's all happening here.
I'm Ben Robinson, and as an archaeologist, I'm fascinated by coastal villages and the relationship between the land and the sea.
I've come to Arnside in the northwest of England, 17 miles north of Lancaster. This beautifully preserved Victorian village sits on the banks of the River Kent, which meets the sea at the sprawling Morecambe Bay estuary. We'll discover how a remote hamlet became the centre of a boat-building empire.
This was the very last days of traditional wooden boat building at its finest.
Then developed into a 19th century tourist hotspot.
So this has gone from a place that gave overnight lodgings to seamen to a place for quite well-heeled holidaymakers.
And why, despite the railway, the village never grew into a big resort.
That's one of the things I love about Arnside. It doesn't change.
There's a fascinating story to this village by the sea.
Like so many other sailors over the centuries, I'm making my approach to Arnside across the fast-flowing waters of the River Kent.
There's no better way to start to see a village by the sea than this. It's a wonderful, wonderful feeling.
Grant Lewis has invited me to make this journey with him on his pride and joy, the Peggy Blackett.
Oh, she's flying now, look at this.
An exact replica of a craft originally made here in Arnside in 1934.
It was a boat owned by Arthur Ransom of Swallows and Amazons fame. And it's a real clue to the history of this place. And I've got another clue to the history of the place right behind me here, the Kent Railway Viaduct. It's a wonderful view of Arnside here. It's great to get a first impression of it from the water. What strikes me is that just looking along the prom here is the uniformity of those houses. They're all the same height, a similar sort of design. They're all a similar sort of age, late Victorian, Edwardian. They all look like boarding houses, guest houses for the middle classes in those eras. We have arrived.
But the first thing I'm looking for is evidence of the village origins.
There's someone enjoying sailing out there today, but back in the 18th century, this would have been far, far busier. Tall ships coming down the coast into the Kent estuary and on down to the port of Milnthorpe, which is just down the river there. The roads were shocking. If you wanted to transport bulk goods, you needed fairly big ships.
In the 1800s, imports to this area would have included coal, salt, pig iron and grain. And I'd expect to see some evidence of that trade here in Arnside.
This building's caught my eye right here. Now, all the other buildings look 19th century and later, and they're domestic, they're guest houses, they're villas. This one looks a bit industrial, a bit rough and ready. Look at these big stones here, these quoins on the corners. It's a stout, robust building. That up there, that didn't start as a window, that started as a door. You can see where it's been blocked up. Now, why would you have a door on the first floor? Well, that's for hauling goods. Look at that stout door as well. This was some form of warehouse, and well, there we go. Ha! I should have read the sign. I needn't read the architecture, I should have just read the sign. The old customs house. So here it is, Arnside being the point at which customs, which tolls, which goods are inspected. It happened here.
And I've been told that the ebb and flow of the estuary has recently uncovered an intriguing structure on the waterfront.
What have we got here? Some timbers, some very big timbers sticking out of the side of the shoreline here. And they're overlain by soil and rubble, so clearly these have been buried for some time. They obviously cover quite a large area as well. And yeah, these are massive timbers. These have been sawn off very deliberately. And there's huge iron bolts pulling them all together. And just looking underneath them, these timbers have been laid directly onto squelchy estuary mud. Wouldn't surprise me if we've got some sort of track or wharf or slipway leading up in that direction. And the fact that it's here next to the customs warehouse where we know the customs office was, that must be significant. This must be to enable cargoes to get up from the beach up to that area a bit easier. My guess is we're looking at something a couple of 100 years old, and this is part of the old port infrastructure. And it looks as though it's eroded out relatively recently. So I wonder how many people know about this. I wonder how many people realise that this is here. I'd love to explore it further. We need an archaeological dig here.
But despite the port, in the early part of the 19th century, Arnside remained a tiny hamlet with only 20 or so buildings. The arrival of one family would be the key to the village's transformation.
Crossfields came to Arnside in about 1815, and they were ship's carpenters by trade. Up here is one of the boatyards. Right, well, I can see the Coast Guard there. Oh my goodness. It looks a little bit derelict. It looks like it hasn't been used for a while. Good grief. Yeah, this looks like a slipway, which any boat builder has to have. And then obviously the big wide doors there, getting materials, boats in and out. Oh, there we are, Crossfield, boat builder. Good grief. There's quite a lot of debris around. There's bits of boat I can see.
The yard may be derelict now, but in Victorian times this was home to the company that would build up to 1,000 boats. I arranged to meet John Hodgson here.
Hi there.
He joined the boatyard as an apprentice back in 1960.
It does look sort of frozen in time. I mean, obviously it's, you know, it's dilapidated, and as the years go by, it gets more so.
It was terrible to see it like this, but it's a snapshot of a period that we've now lost.
Yeah.
The very last days of traditional wooden boat building at its finest.
Yeah.
And then fiberglass came in.
Modern materials and new production techniques closed down a business originally set up to produce nobbies, a particular kind of boat the Crossfields helped to design for the prawn fishermen of Morecambe Bay.
There was shallow draft, which meant that you could stay out a little bit longer and get back while the tide was well on its way out. They had to be pretty fast. The first boats back got the best prices for the prawns. They were forever floating on the water, lying on the sand. They had to be strong enough to withstand that.
Some of the wood used in the boats came from around Arnside. The rest they imported. The Crossfield brothers developed a boat design suited to the area's fast-flowing waters.
Now, see, you've got a sort of demonstration, a panel here. Is that how they were constructed?
Yes, the planks are fixed onto oak frames, and the plank for the last space, what we call the shutter, would be made to be a very precise, tight fit, and it would be driven into the side of the boat and nailed in and tighten everything up, and that was the most critical plank of the lot.
There's not a lot of room for error there, is there?
Not a lot, no. If you want to keep it watertight, it's got to be a very precise fit.
It doesn't sound to me like the techniques that you encountered 62 years ago were too different from when the Crossfields started here.
Oh, no, very much the same. Yeah, these are tools that we were using at the time, and just the same as the Crossfields.
The business adapted their highly regarded designs for the leisure industry. Sailing enthusiast Arthur Ransom owned 2 Crossfield boats, including Swallow, now immortalised in Swallows and Amazons.
I heard in the early days that they were built in complete silence.
I think when you're working with wood and tools, the sound of your tool on the wood is so important.
So you're listening for the sound of the plane, and that's telling you how it's reacting to the wood.
Yeah.
That's something you don't think of. You think it's all done by feel, but it makes sense. If there's a bump or a ripple in the wood, you can actually hear it as well.
Yes, sound is very important. I never ever had a radio. I see they've got one in here, but I never had a radio in my workshop at all.
It must be an immensely satisfying thing to take lumps of wood and turn them into a mode of transport.
Tell you that day, that boat goes into the water for the first time and doesn't leak. Immensely satisfying.
The Crossfields are successful boat builders and their products are renowned, but it didn't develop into a major national industry. These aren't workers' cottages. This isn't a factory village. These are grand villas. Something else was happening to transform Arnside.
In the early 19th century, the Industrial Revolution was in full flow. There was a huge demand for coal and iron ore, but rail was taking over from ships as a more efficient way to transport them. For this reason, in 1856, the Furness Railway Company decided to build a new rail line, and this required a viaduct to cross the river at Arnside, opening a new chapter in the village's history. Dr. Stephen Corntz, a former Arnside resident, is an expert on Victorian industry.
Stephen, this is an incredible piece of engineering. Why was it built here?
The simple reason is that the Morecambe Bay is immense, and this is the nearest you could get from one side to the other. So in the end, they decided that they would cross at the narrow point. They built the embankments out, you can see there, as far as they could go.
There were certain natural advantages here, but they still had to overcome this problem. There's no hard foundation.
In the middle, there was simply no way to get down to something where you could use conventional technology to build back up. So they devised this technology where you actually impale long, hollow rods down into the sand, jetting water as you go. And when you take the jets away, you end up with a sort of floating bridge.
But the Kent Viaduct was built to carry goods, not passengers. Originally, there wasn't even a plan to build a station here at Arnside.
This kind of line here, none of these were about moving people. I mean, you know, they were very dubious about the prospects for any real passenger traffic because you only got little villages at the start. You know, why are these people going to travel by train?
But the local pub and hotel owners saw an opportunity to bring in a new type of customer. Visitors from the growing industrial regions keen to enjoy the fresh air and natural beauty of the countryside.
What they seem to have had is this light bulb moment. If we could actually get people to come off the train, this is a very pretty place. People are starting to want to go some distance to find places like Arnside, and we've got a railway that might well bring them.
They persuaded the Furness Railway Company to build a station in the village and started to upgrade their facilities for a different kind of trade.
This pub behind you, if you look at the right-hand end, that's the old pub. Quite low down, very modest building. The bit on the left was built for tourists, and it's much grander. They even changed the name of the pub to the Crown because fighting cocks didn't sound very good. Locals later on insisted on changing it back. So this has gone from a place that probably gave overnight lodgings to seamen to a place that's got a posh bit for quite well-heeled holidaymakers.
And Arnside's entrepreneurs had a stroke of luck. In 1865, the railway company invested in a small pier for ships to dock at the waterfront.
This wasn't built for tourists originally.
No, nobody would have ever dreamed there would have been any point. This is a by chance. Arnside gets a pier, which turns out people actually very much like walking along and sitting down on and viewing the trains coming across the viaduct.
So it's still doing its job.
Absolutely it is, yes.
But what were those Victorian visitors who came to Arnside looking for? The daily siren to warn modern bathers about the incoming tide suggests it probably wasn't the opportunity to swim in the sea here.
That is an incredibly eerie sound. It's like an old air raid siren or something like that. And it's a reminder that beautiful though this place is, and it is majestic, this view, it's also a treacherous place. When the tide's out and there's an expanse of sand out there, it looks friendly, it looks inviting. But then the tide comes in and these channels fill up. And you don't have long, it whips in, it really does. It's caught people out for hundreds of years.
So it looks like the tourists didn't really come here for the beaches. The Victorian visitors came for the natural beauty of the area, and in particular, Arnside Knot. This small hill is now recognised as an area of outstanding natural beauty. 19th century nature lovers were captivated by the stunning wildlife, the rare flowers and the windswept trees clinging to this unusual limestone landscape. Inspired by the scientific studies of Darwin and the romantic poems of Wordsworth, the Victorians were fascinated by nature.
Oh, here we go. This is the sort of thing that the Victorians like to see. This upended tree with the stumps, the roots all exposed here, bits of limestone in amongst it. Just an interesting, intricate shape. They would create stumperies, turn these upside down and put them in their garden. I think up here there's something even quirkier.
One natural feature on Arnside Knot became a well-known landmark.
Oh, wow. This is really curious. It's not a sculpture, this is actually one tree, or maybe two trees knitted together. There's legends about how young lovers came up here and tied two larch saplings together, and they entwined and grew together thereafter. It's another little peculiarity of this place, another little attraction to it.
But most impressive of all is the summit. Arnside Knot is taller than Blackpool Tower and offers stunning views.
This is just absolutely breathtaking. It's fantastic. Got Morecambe Bay over there, the sands of the Kent estuary coming in here. I can see the peaks of the Lake District just popping through the cloud there.
This must have seemed even more remarkable to the many visitors from the grimy, polluted industrial cities of the time.
But the joy about this place for your Victorian middle class is you can come up here enjoy all this wildness, but not actually have to be part of it. You don't have to climb the tallest peaks in the Lake District. You can see it all in front of you like a wonderful picture. And the railways were really promoting Arnside. I've got an illustrated guide to the holiday resorts on the Furness Railway here. It dates to about 1900. And it talks about the attractions of Arnside, and specifically the knot here. It says it's 550 feet high and covered with trees. Those who climb to its summit will be amply rewarded for their trouble, for the view to be obtained is one of great variety and extent. Well, they're not lying.
Arnside was booming. The population rose from only 140 in 1841 to nearly 1,000 in 1900. The smattering of older buildings had been joined by grand terraces of Victorian villas, originally designed as boarding houses for the visitors arriving at the village from the new rail station. And the Crossfield family were in the right place at the right time with the right skills. They'd made their name as boat makers, but now they became house builders during the Arnside building boom. Members of the family moved from the small cottage they'd lived in when they'd arrived in the area to a new house just around the corner, one of the impressive villas built by the family firm.
Are you Mr. Crossfield?
You must be Ben.
Hi, how you doing?
I am
And
very
we agreed
good,
to
thank you.
meet here
We
for a
did.
special reason.
We did indeed.
Eric's great-uncle was Fred Crossfield, who ran the boat building company. This was Fred's house, built by the Crossfields in about 1890, owned by the family until his death in 1963.
The last time I was here was 60 years ago.
60 years
60 years ago, when I was 6 years old.
A trip down memory lane.
Certainly a trip down memory lane.
After you.
Thank you, Ben. Got so many photos at home, and one of them is of my great-uncle Fred standing here at the door. I can see the whole family there, just part of this place that meant so much to them all. This is a moment.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember this tiling.
Yes, well, that's original. That would have been with the build.
Definitely
It's
remember
wonderful.
that tiling.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the sort of size that the place was.
I mean, it's clearly been altered. There's partitioned and so forth.
It has, but this is the room that I remember at the back where we just sit and talk, and there's the window. And then Uncle Fred's seat was about here, I think. He had this big seat, it was about here. He was gentle, but so powerful, quietly, gently powerful.
The family made an audio recording of Fred, the last of the great Crossfield boat builders, shortly before he died.
The chap went to the market in his Russian cart, you see.
He had the most fantastic dialect.
He's getting yards of dead, up in the thread and bucket.
His voice sort of wrapped around you as a little boy.
He did his shopping. And all the way home, he keeps thinking, I'm forgetting someone. It flowed
like waves, really, in the river.
And when he got home, his wife asked him, she says, where's the Russian cart? Well,
He was a great man, a very, very great man.
Much of the interior of Fred's house has been altered, but one feature remains constant.
I remember these enormous, great, long, tall windows. Then, of course, you can look out to the estuary and out to the viaduct. It hasn't changed. That's one of the things I love about Arnside. It doesn't change.
The history of this village, just like the history of this house, is interwoven with the lives of the Crossfield family.
So many connections, so many stories. It's just fantastic. People make a place, don't they? People and families shape a place. We can talk about the railways, the shipping and so forth, but ultimately it's all about people.
It is about people, but in this case there was also a bonding with each other through a place.
Eric has one more thing to show me. A letter from the family archive sent to his grandfather in 1922, when the village was booming as a popular destination for rail tourists.
The letter is from a lady who came here with a friend because it's a beautiful place, and they were out paddling and they got stuck in the quicksands. And it says, "Dear Mr. Crossfield, I have so many very happy memories of Arnside that the thought of a few rather dreadful moments is very easily wiped out by most grateful appreciation of how we were extricated." So it turns out that my grandfather rescued them from the quicksands. This was not an unusual thing that people would get caught, because these are very, very dangerous waters. But these ladies did more than just say thank you by letter. They actually gave a wonderful, a beautiful present, which was this etching, which is the most magnificent thing. It's two yachts apparently racing with this beautiful counter stern, which was very typical Crossfield counter stern. And this was a gift by this lady, Dorothy.
Oh, it's a wonderful collection, and it's wonderful to see the family, obviously boat building, but also the grocers here and the building houses as well. It sort of encapsulates what the Crossfields were doing in Arnside.
Dorothy's brush with death on the Kent River serves as a reminder of why Arnside never grew to become a big, bustling seaside resort like nearby Blackpool or Morecambe.
The views out there are spectacular and the shifting sands are wonderful, but they're quite treacherous for swimming and paddling. There aren't miles of golden sands for that classic bucket and spade holiday. The other thing is there's no major investor, there's no big magnate pouring money into the place. There's no town council to improve the infrastructure of the place. Its growth is constrained. This parade of shops here, this is it. This is the commercial heart of the village.
I think it's probably for the best. Arnside remains a charming Victorian resort, catering mainly for day trippers and nature lovers.
She's a bright ship and a bonny ship, she was built for to sail. Her name it is Seven, now we'll sing you her tale.
This small seaside village has been preserved in Aspic by a tide fierce enough to limit the bucket and spade brigade.
Arnside has been shaped by the natural environment around it, by the sea, by the land. It's been shaped by transport, by the ships that used to trade up and down this river, and by the railway as well. But above all, it's been shaped by people, and not just the families that live here, the villagers, but by people who have come to buy the boats and sail them away, and even by the day trippers that come just for a few hours to enjoy its unique charms.
She's a bright ship and a bonny ship, she was built for to sail. Her name it is Seven, and we'll sing you her tale. She's a bright ship and a bonny ship, she was built for to sail. Her name it is Seven, now we finish